Jan de Leeuw, it's a pleasure to have you here in Rennes. Thanks for coming, and I'd like to just ask you a little personal view about the history of correspondence analysis, where it started and where we are now.
Well, since it's a personal view, I can start by saying how I came to correspondence analysis. I was working on multidimensional scaling problems in 1968, around that time. And a friend and a colleague of mine had been to a conference or a workshop in France, and he came back with Brigitte Cordier's thesis. Mm-hmm. And I looked at that, and I discovered that it was roughly the same material that I was working on. So that was how I became aware. I knew about the work of Goodman from the 40s, and the work of Hayashi that sort of followed Goodman in the 60s. And so I discovered that there was a French school and a Japanese school, and that they were working on basically the same materials without that much interaction between them. And then I sort of started looking into the history in the statistics literature, and got back to Pearson and Hirschfeld and the older papers that were sometimes difficult to find, but also contained the same materials. Mm.
Yes, what I find interesting about the French school was the geometric approach, essentially geometric approach. There was many algebraic approaches previously, and then also in the so-called Giffey approach that you were, in a sense, responsible for, and that also the geometric approach came out, but perhaps not as strong as the French one, maybe.
No, it's that's the distinguishing characteristic. Goodman was never interested in higher dimensional solutions, basically. He explicitly warns in his 1941 paper at looking at additional eigenvalues, because they are strange and nonlinear and complicated. And of course, the Benzic-Rie approach starts from scratch by a picture, or by aiming for a picture, as it were. Mm-hmm. And we more or less did the same thing. And part of it is possibly, I'm not exactly sure about this, but of course I went to Bell Laboratories in 73, 74 because of my work on multidimensional scaling. And Benzic-Rie had also been to Bell Laboratories somewhat before that, and worked with Roger Shepard mostly. And also was interested in multidimensional scaling. So I think there's a sort of a common interest in pictures, which in my case was also reinforced by John van der Geer's work, because he also was very much into, let's say, geometric interpretation of linear algebra and computational statistics.
And now we find ourselves in 2011.
Yes.
At this conference. How do you see this whole field at the moment?
Well, I think, it's not a coincidence that last year and the year before that I teamed up with Patrick Mayer to get some of the correspondence analysis techniques, the Giffey techniques, integrated into the R environment, and to write separate R packages, and you've done the same thing. It's still very much alive and active, and to some extent more and more accepted, if only because the emphasis in statistics as a discipline is shifting from, let's say, mathematical statistics, has been since the 70s, shifting from mathematical statistics to computational statistics, and to analysis of small, well-controlled data sets, to the analysis of huge, much less controlled data sets. So everything that's computational these days is doing well, and correspondence analysis as a way of visualizing possibly large data sets, I think, is also doing well.
Thank you very much for coming from California to Rennes.
It was a long trip, but it was worth it, I think.
Thank you.